to India and Ireland, round Africa and back again. We don't really need to know just where we'll go. Maybe Canada, then to Brazil, then through the Alpine foothills. All I really want to know is, can we go? Oh baby, can we go? Round and around the globe.
Welcome to Take Me With You, episode 119. I'm Ryan,
And I'm Cheryl. We are two well-traveled people who want to go everywhere.
but that's not going to happen. So instead, we'll travel vicariously by inviting a guest to share their unique travel stories with us.
Today, we're talking to Andrea. Andrea lives in Seattle and works in fundraising for Children of the Nations, and also has a side hustle and a watercolor painting business. Welcome, Andrea.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yay. We're
Wow.
happy that you're here.
A side hustle being watercolor painting. That's exciting.
I'm pointing at art you can't
I
see
couldn't
behind
tell
my
if you were
shoulder.
pumping your fist or pointing at the art behind you like yeah.
Yeah, no. Lately I've been doing a lot of dog portraits in watercolor.
So fun.
Yeah, but I also paint some stuff that's pretty serious too. So I guess it runs the gamut.
That's awesome. That's so good. The first time I learned that Andrea was an artist was when we were at like a sip and paint night where they, like everyone has their own canvas and they like walk you through step by step, which is great for, I think it's good for people like me who I have artistic abilities, but have never taken a painting class. So it's fun to like, oh, I can make this look good and the steps are very helpful for me. And Andrea was late, like pretty late to it. And she was like, it's cool, I'll catch up. And then she like poured a bunch of water on her canvas and I was like, what is she doing? And like made this gorgeous painting. And I was like, how did she do that? Oh my gosh. And it was like, oh, because she's an artist and so she knows how to paint and doesn't have to follow the steps of like, make the horizon line.
Oh, Cheryl, I was such a jerk that night. I think back on that day and I was like, oh, you could have been nicer.
I don't think you were mean about it though.
I was like, I need more water. I need these Dixie cups are not cutting it. I need more brushes. I got paint on other people's canvases and they were so sweet about it, but I could tell they were mad.
Oh, no.
I didn't notice any of that, but it was fun to see you make this really cool painting in like half the time that it took me. So.
Well, I feel like I have to ask the question, do you paint from your travels? Have you done things based on
Ooh.
places you've been?
Yes, absolutely.
Do you paint
Yeah,
on your
I-
travels or from your travels or both?
Honestly, I paint like 99% from photographs, like photographs of my travels, and then I sometimes embellish them. Well, a lot of times I actually change them. I mean, I can do photorealism, but it's kind of not fair when you're traveling to some of the most destitute places ever, and you turn around and do a painting of someone who's living in poverty, and then you sell their image and you profit off their poverty. That's terrible. So I absolutely change identities. I change their colors of the clothing they're wearing. Sometimes I blur out faces, just out of respect for a person's privacy. And then a lot of times I also take some of what I make from my art and I donate it back to an organization doing good work in that community. Because you never want to benefit off someone else's struggle.
Yeah.
That makes you a terrible human. So yeah. So yes, to answer your question, I do paint about my travels.
That's a really good point of view though. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So unlike Cheryl, I do not have artistic ability. So I'm always fascinated by art because it's something that I am not even remotely good at. but I really appreciate when other people are, because it's, again, so far above me. And so I'm curious, when you paint, how much of that is about, like, of the experience for you is doing the object, and how much of that is a way to process things around the images?
I mean, it's both. So if I'm just painting someone's Labrador, which I did like last month, um, that's just more about like I'm just doing this painting. I'm creating this for someone else, for them to enjoy, and I just want to make it as accurate and as beautiful as possible so that they're happy. And then that's fun for me. It's not, there's nothing too terribly deep about it. But but I've also done a lot of paintings recently about Seattle and get ready, racially restrictive housing covenants. So about racism in our democratic city. And so that for me has been very eye-opening and a lot about my own soul searching, because what I realized through doing these paintings and with talking to other people along the way who are more knowledgeable than I about both art and the history of our city, what I learned is that through my painting is that racism is bad for me. And for those who can't see me, I'm white. And so I figured out that, you know what, racism affected who attended my churches. It affected who led my churches. So I did a painting about that. It affected who I was friends with. And I realized that, racism that affects housing and where people live and where they grow up, that's bad for everybody. I now go to a multiracial church, and my pastors, I don't think any of them are white, which is, like there's plenty of white, wonderful pastors who are white, who are fantastic. Like, I'm not saying that they're bad, but what I'm saying is that the pastors at the church I go to are phenomenal. I mean, I benefit from them every week, and because their sermons are so wonderful. And so that's caused me to also realize, well, churches could have benefited from guys like them like 100 years ago. and we weren't, we locked them out. So that was a very long answer to your question of, is this about you and like personal growth, or I forget how you worded the question, but yeah, it can absolutely be something deeper than just painting a cute painting of puppies.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting and cool, the way you can take something that you do for fun, but also the side hustle, as Cheryl said, but also find a way to learn more about yourself and about your community and about history and other people. That's really cool. To be able to connect all those things.
It's been a long journey, and I'm still on it.
Oh, yes. I hear you on that one. So we have 3 questions that we like to ask all of our guests. And the first one is, why do you travel?
Oh boy. I travel because I like to go and, I travel for the same reasons lots of people do. I'd like to go see new places and meet new people. And I like to learn about the places I go. I like to learn the history. I certainly like to go see the art of the places that I go. And I also travel to learn about justice, but you probably already figured that one out. So that's why I travel.
And how does that tie to the work that you do?
So I work for a global children's nonprofit. We're called Children of the Nations. And so we provide holistic care and services to children in Africa and the Caribbean. And so we were greatly affected by COVID because we normally send short-term teams to go see the places that we work. And there's been a lot of talk lately, and rightly so, about short-term mission trips gone wrong that are actually harmful
Mm-hmm.
to the places that you might send someone. I agree. Those I've been on those trips as a high schooler. But those trips can be good if you go to more or less just observe and learn about what's already being done by members of a certain community to alleviate poverty. And then once you see it and smell it and experience it and taste it, then you can go home and spread the word because you have that firsthand knowledge, you have those firsthand stories. So in the real world, yeah, we do send people to go and to learn and to grow from their experience, and also to realize that Western culture doesn't have all the answers and that there is plenty that you can learn from the 2/3 world, which is probably a better term than third world. Well, it is a better term.
The 2/3. I haven't heard that term before. That's interesting.
It's a grad school term. That's, I mean, I wish people would use it more because I do think it's more respectful.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's probably not a commonly known term.
How would you define it?
For the non-Western world. The 2/3, literally 2/3 of the world.
Okay. So like that's the whole definition is just like
yeah.
that we're the minority and
Yeah, like to, like half, I mean, this is old data, maybe it's still true, but like as of 10 years ago, half of the world lived on $2 a day or less. And then the next percentage made like $10 a day or less. That's still terrible. And so really you and I are the 1%. So I know I'm making the math all weird, but yeah, basically the 1/3 is like Northern Hemisphere, Western culture, people who are just not poor. But the 2/3 of the world are what you and I would consider poor. So that's kind of where that comes from.
Yeah.
I like that.
There was, last year in 2020, everyone's favorite year, one of the things that I was able to do, as a lot of people were, was I read a lot more than I normally do because I had a whole lot of time by myself. And one of the books that I read was one that I had been on my list for a while called Factfulness. I don't know if either of you have read the book or are familiar with it. It was written by, I believe he was Swedish, global health professor. And it goes through things about global health in general and trends and misunderstandings that people have. And one of them that he kind of talks about early on is sort of these ideas of, where the world is economically when you look at all of them and what that spectrum is. And, I don't remember if he directly talks about, moving away from the term third world, but he definitely uses a very different system to talk about it, kind of like what you're talking about, where it's not, it's not about like necessarily better or worse. It's just, it is different. And where we are today, or let's see, where we were 100 years ago, there are other countries are today, but that we would still look at and say, we might call them third world, even though they might be a similar place to where we were 100 years ago or 100 years ago or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's just really interesting perspective. So I appreciate that. Yeah. And I've not heard that the 2/3 of the world, but I think that's a good way to put it in perspective as well. I appreciate that.
Yeah. I mean, you want to use terms that have the least amount of bias as possible, that are just like as factual as you can be and respectful.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, in your travels, how much do you focus on traveling to the 2/3 world versus like Western culture? What does that look like for you?
Honestly, it's probably been like half and half. I was like, oh, haha, I've spent 2/3 of my travels in the 2/3 world, but no, that's not true. It's probably more like 50-50. Like, I've spent time in Rwanda, Kenya. Technically, I've spent a few minutes in Tanzania. I've spent time in the Philippines, but then I've also been to Western Europe and Canada too. So it's just really, a little of everywhere. Honduras, Mexico. So yeah, I guess it's half and half.
I think I would guess, I don't know the numbers, I would guess that's quite a lot compared to your average American, though, of like amount of time spent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. So you've kind of touched on the second question a little bit, but I'm going to still ask it kind of more directly. What type of traveler are you?
What type of traveler? I mean, I'm pretty average. I mean, I do like to plan, knowing that your plan is, it may or may not actually happen. So I like to be flexible. And so I don't know. I'm kind of both. I don't mind spontaneity when traveling at all. But when you're traveling to a place where you have an armed escort, which I've had that happen, you want to plan for that. And so, yeah. So, so I don't know, kind of run the gamut. Like, I don't mind a little bit of adventure. I've been on a safari, I've been on a gorilla trek, cool. And those can be a bit spontaneous in and of themselves. A little bit of things can happen that you don't expect. But then again, I am not the kind of traveler that tries to pack a million things in every day. Like I am that traveler that will waste half a day on a trip because I slept in. and I'm okay with that. And so I do like to travel with folks that maybe aren't so regimented, who maybe would not get upset over a sleep-in day.
Yeah.
There.
Now, are those sleep-in days, at least right at like on the trip, planned, or is that you just don't get up in the morning one day?
I mean, if there's nothing big planned, yeah, I might sleep a bit. Just yeah. Oh well.
I mean, that's good self-care if you need to sleep.
It is.
Or I might just be lazy and just I might just stay in my room even though I'm in Paris. I am not opposed to just like staying in and watching TV for half a day.
You sound like my husband, actually. Yeah. And then I go between like feeling like, oh my gosh, we are wasting precious minutes that we could, oh my gosh, do you know what's right out there? And also like, oh yeah, rest is good though. And like, we are taking vacation time and should enjoy ourselves. And part of enjoying yourself can be watching TV sometimes. So like,
yep,
I see that.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. I think for me, what I found is I think I tend to be a little bit more regimented than Cheryl, which probably is not a surprise to most people who've listened to our podcast or who know us. But at the same time, often I hear people doing things in the evening when they travel. And I found that that's when I don't. Like, that's when I will do that rest, is like, I'll be out for the day. Dinner. I'll do things during the day. But yeah, after I've done dinner, I will go back to wherever I'm staying and I'm just in, and I'm in for the night. And that's where I like watch TV or chill out or whatever, even though oftentimes, nightlife or cool things to go do and stuff. I think those are the things that I generally peace out on.
Yeah. I think both are permissible. Like, yes. I mean, there's 100 million ways to travel.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. Sure. And based on those 100 million ways and the places you've been, what is your number one travel tip?
My number one travel tip. Gosh, I'd have to think about it. I'm going to start talking and I'm going to get there. So for me, it's not packing light. I love Rick Steves, but I don't believe in packing light because I'm a girl. And you just never know what you're going to need. And so, and I don't like traveling in the same clothes for 4 days. That's just not me. So I'm okay with, not packing light. You just have to prepare for it. Get the suitcase with the rollers. I worked at a grocery store for 7 years. I can carry stuff. I'm okay with that. So you know what? That's my rule. Don't pack light. It's my travel tip.
I think that's like our first travel tip that has been like the exact opposite of another travel tip. And I love it.
That's awesome.
I feel like your philosophy that I'm going to develop for you, Andrea, is like, you just because they say you need to pack light, no, you figure you out and what's going to work for you on your trip. And just because they say you need to go see the Eiffel Tower is like, if you need to stay in and watch some TV, then you stay in and you watch some TV. And like, let's not judge each other.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, there we go.
No, you know what? Actually, okay, I have a second travel tip, and I think it's equally important.
Okay.
Because, and Cheryl, you just reminded me of it. And that's to be culturally aware of where you are, because I really, really hate it when us Westerners go somewhere and are rude to local people. And so obviously be polite to everyone, because you actually don't know where you are. You're not from there. You don't understand the culture. And there are things happening between the lines that you're not seeing, that you should try to look for, because the more culturally aware you are, the better trip you're going to have, because you're going to make more friends along the way. Case in point, a lot of times in the 2/3 world, people live in cultures that have something called power distance. And power distance is a fancy word for a local culture's pecking order. So in the US, for example, we don't really have power distance. There's not really a pecking order. There is, but like you could tell your boss to go take a hike. And you might get in trouble for it, but you might not. I mean, people do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you go to a place like Kenya, you do not do that, because the power distance is stronger, and it's expected and it's normal, and no one's going to change that anytime soon. So it's akin to a caste system. And so you're not going to change that. So, let's say you go to a village, and you want to hang out with the kids because they're so cute, and they're adorable. But honestly, who you should really be paying attention to are the village elders. That's who you talk to. They're your gatekeeper, and you're going to make a lot more friends in a new place that you don't know if you talk to the right person, which is often the elder. So yeah, I wish we were more culturally sensitive. And that's just one. I have cultural sensitivity rules for days, but that's probably another conversation.
Well, but I do want to follow up briefly and say, let's say someone is listening and like, oh my gosh, yes, I totally want to be more culturally aware. How would you start to become more culturally aware? Because like power distance, I've never heard that before. I would consider myself decently well-traveled. I have not been to the African continent yet, but that's something that's new to me.
Sure. So there's this really great book that I would start with, and the title, don't let the title scare you, nor the book's size, because it's huge, but it's actually a super easy read, and it's called Software of the Mind.
Ooh.
Software of the Mind.
Sounds like a book for Ryan.
It's written by and it's by a researcher by the name of Geert Hofstede, and Mr. Hofstede, I'm so sorry I'm sure I'm butchering your name. He's a Dutch researcher, so
and he is a listener of our podcast.
Dutch names.
So
But yeah, he has like maybe it's 7 now cultural indices. So one of them is power distance. Another is masculinity versus femininity. So like Asian cultures are actually more feminine, whereas in South America, those cultures tend to be more masculine. So those are little things to know. Another one is short-term versus long-term orientation. So like take the Philippines, that's a short-term orientation culture, which means that people live very much in the moment. So case in point, Friday is payday and malls have sales on Friday, which is payday, because if people have money, they spend it, which is not to say that they're bad people or irresponsible. They're a product of where they live. It's a short-term orientation culture, whereas the U.S. tends to be more long-term orientation. So anyway, we're generally speaking, I guess we plan a little more, and which is not to say one is better than the other. I'm just saying that's just how it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are good things to know. Because wouldn't it be terrible to go somewhere and to assume someone was being irresponsible when no, they're not. They're just living in a way. They're just doing what they always do. What's normal. So I think those are good things to know. So Software of the Mind is a really good book to read, and they do a really good job of breaking down all of that information, all of those cultural indices in like super bite-sized chunks. Like it's actually quite digestible. So.
That's awesome. I think about how people view time as an example of that. Is like, is it rude to be late for something, or is it rude to leave your friend's house in the middle of a conversation because you need to get to something? And it's like, depends on who you ask, it depends on where you live.
Yeah.
And
in
some cultures it'd be incredibly rude to start without someone. And it doesn't matter how late that person is, you don't start without someone, and then others it'd be like, well, no, that person was rude for being late and we're going to start without them because they were being very rude. And so it's really interesting. Yeah. I had a fun one in Spain. I was staying with this couple who they're Americans, but they've lived there for years, and they had a local friend come over, and the man of the family I was staying with, I was talking with this man. And they were talking to each other in Spanish. So I was picking up some of the conversation, but okay, I'm not picking up all of it, but that's fine. They're also like not primarily talking to me. They're looking at each other and talking. And at one point, Dan, the American man, started translating for me. And it was interesting because later he told me, he was like, yeah, I realized he did something that was very Spanish. He was like, he was talking to you at one point. But he was looking at me because I was the oldest person there. And so he was like, of course. And he was like, he lives in Spain, so he didn't even think much of it. He's like explaining to me, he was like, of course he was looking at me. It would be so rude if he wasn't looking at me, even though he was telling you something. And he was like, and that's why I started translating, because he was talking to you and I wanted to make sure you understood what he was saying.
Oh,
and
okay.
So that was really interesting because I was like, oh, he was talking to me. Like I didn't know he wasn't making eye contact with me, and so that was an interesting one. So it's fun.
Yeah, no, we've got plenty to learn from the rest of the world. So it's funny how cultures are, sometimes they're very similar, but sometimes they're different from us. So
and in unexpected ways.
Yes, that's very true.
Yeah. Well, I feel like we've already learned so much. This has been awesome so far. And we haven't even got to your story yet. So what travel story are you going to tell us about today?
Well, I was thinking I would talk about my time in Rwanda.
Awesome. That would be
cool.
great.
Yeah, when we can travel again, everyone should go to Rwanda. I was actually there it's been 10 years now. So it's been a while. So Rwanda's probably changed since I was there. But I don't know. What do you want to learn about Rwanda?
I mean, I'd love to hear, first of all,
everything.
Well, yes, obviously everying. But first of all, like, why were you there? Who did you go with? Length of stay? Just kind of like big overview looking at this trip that you took.
Sure. Yeah. So okay. So at the time, I sponsored a child in Rwanda through World Vision. And I still sponsor kids through World Vision. I work for a sponsorship entity. Children of the Nations is a sponsorship entity. But, I started on my sponsorship journey with World Vision, and I was sponsoring a child in Rwanda. And at the time, I'd had the goal of meeting every single kid I ever sponsored. I've already failed miserably at that. But I went to East Africa with my cousin, who I had also convinced to sponsor a child in Rwanda. And so we actually spent 2 weeks in Africa. We spent about a week in Kenya because I sponsored a child there and had already been to Kenya. So it was like, well, that's an easier trip. I kind of know what I'm doing as far as like getting around there. But hey, Rwanda's next door-ish. So we'll just go to Rwanda too to meet our sponsored children. So anyway, so we did. Between the two of us, we met 3 sponsored children. And so, of course, we went to Rwanda to meet our sponsored children. And then when you're in Rwanda, you will inevitably learn their very recent traumatic history and how they have turned a new leaf. And it's also really normal for travelers to go visit the gorillas in Rwanda. So that's what we did. We did all 3 of those things.
That's so cool. So I am curious about the logistics on the front end of this trip. So these were World Vision kids who you were sponsoring.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so did World Vision play any role in like helping you figure out this trip, or like advice or logistics, or like how to find these kids? Like how did that look?
Yes. So yeah, to make a trip like that happen, you definitely do call World Vision US and you say, hey, I'd like to go visit my sponsored child in this location. And how do I get that? How do I make that happen? And so they do. They walk you through it, purchasing plane tickets, figuring out visas, entry fees, do you need your passport? That kind of thing. Then from there, they do connect you with local staff. So if, like, I never had anyone pick me up from the airport, but like, you get yourself to your hotel and then they pick you up on the appointed day to go meet your child. And then they handle those logistics, because I don't know how to get to specific villages in Rwanda or Kenya to meet children. There's not even street signs. So, and staff also takes care of your safety too. In fact, during that trip, we actually wanted to fit in a 3-day trip to Uganda, but World Vision said no, because their election was happening and it's already kind of violent, or it has potential to be violent. So they said, no, don't come. And we said, okay, we're not can't enforce it. So yes, so they definitely do that. And then also, I had been to Kenya like 5 years earlier, and was traveling with a group of people from my church. And because I think there are so many of us, we kind of stood out. So that's the time that I traveled with armed guards. Well, maybe they were policemen. They were armed. Either way. And so it was a safety precaution, so that nothing bad happened.
So do you feel like it made sense to have a safety precaution being in a larger group of Americans than like just 2 Americans?
Oh, I think you need to consider that for regardless of the size of your group.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. There's sometimes, I love Nairobi. Like, I'm always happy to go back, and I have very many warm memories. But back in 2006 and 2011, me traveling by myself in downtown Nairobi, could be a little difficult just because people, they just notice you because you can't help but stand out. And so you do have to pay attention for pickpocketers. And then there's the Maasai market in downtown Nairobi. And I did do that by myself. And just the culture is to, you know, try to make the sale with your customers. And so it got a little overwhelming. And so, and people did tell me, you know, maybe bring someone with you, but I just didn't have anyone at the moment. So, and it was one of those situations where I was like, oh, if I don't go do this, I'm never going to experience this. So yeah, I think it just depending on where you are. I mean, yeah, the reality is that, you know, sometimes you do have to plan for your safety. So you just have to make sure that you've done that. And I think honestly, one of the best things you can do is just talk to local people and just see what they suggest, because they'll tell you, like your hotel staff, they'll tell you. And so yeah, it's good to pay attention to what they say.
I like that. That's cool. So yeah, I would just love to hear, I think, about your experience, and then just also like anything you learned about these places, I think would be really cool too. This is pretty much the podcast where Cheryl doesn't know anything about Africa, and she learns through people telling her about countries in Africa.
Not just Cheryl.
Brian doesn't know some things too.
I mean, yeah. So with Rwanda, I mean, obviously it was the best, like some of the best days of my life have been meeting sponsored children. And you know, if you are a child sponsor and you have a chance to go meet them, oh my gosh, go do it. It's so totally worth it. Because, you know, it's so funny because people often ask me if the kids are real, like, oh, haha, you know, someone's just taking my money and running with it. Like, but well, and I suppose there are, well, you know what, there are bad child sponsorship entities out there, but honestly, there's a lot of good ones too. And I know because I work for one. But what's funny is that the kids often ask if their sponsor is real.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Neither
like,
side wants
just
to get
some
played.
American that you're sending me a picture of.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, no. So yeah, if you ever have a chance, so those days are always meaningful to me, because then you realize like firsthand that, yeah, that $36 a month, yeah, I would not have minded spending that on other things or any more travel. But that's when you realize, oh my gosh, I really did contribute to this person going to school and getting an education. Like when I went to Rwanda, I met my sponsored child who was actually a bit older, and she had survived the genocide as a 4-year-old.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
As a 4-year-old. And World Vision had found her wandering by herself. She couldn't even do simple things like wash her hands because she didn't know how. Why would she? And so she did end up going to high school for the first time as like as an 18-year-old, which honestly, I'm just happy she went, because if any of us had survived a genocide as a 4-year-old and lost our family, where would we be? Where would we be? So what I realized is I couldn't change her past, but I got to be a part of creating her future. And so, yeah, I helped my girl go to high school, and I was, all about that. I'm all about, kids and young adults being educated. And so, yeah. And then, I work for a sponsorship entity now, and I get to see like kids going on and being job creators and becoming teachers and principals and starting their own businesses and becoming like electrical technicians and getting into, environmentally friendly businesses. Like, and they do so many amazing things. So, yeah. So, I still think if you have a chance to visit your sponsored child, oh my gosh, do it. And then with Rwanda, like, you know, you definitely, you can't help but learn their history because there's evidence of it everywhere. There's, so for those not familiar, like the big thing that happened in Rwanda was somewhat recently was the 1994 genocide. And so there's multiple people groups in Rwanda, but the big one is the Hutus. And then the second biggest one I would say is the Tutsis. And so we probably don't have time to get into like the nitty gritty of that whole conflict. But 800,000 people died in the genocide in 1994. And that was probably mostly Tutsis. And so it happened from April to like July of 1994. So there are genocide memorials everywhere. And on balance, I would say Rwanda as a country has done a very good job of committing to moving past it. They got a ton of funding from the rest of the world because the rest of the world knew the genocide was happening and did nothing. And so once people, I think, really realized what horrible thing happened, I think they felt guilty, to be honest. And funding to help rebuild the country started to come in. And so Rwanda has absolutely done that. They're a phoenix rising. And so like the roads in Rwanda are really good. The schools are really good. There's schools everywhere. I think all kids are in school there because, I mean, of the number of schools I saw. Kigali is safe. Like I could be out till dusk by myself and I'd be fine. And it's really clean. Even back in 2011, there was a plastic bag ban, like those plastic grocery shopping bags. You can't use them in Rwanda. So there's a lot of social entrepreneurships in Rwanda. Tourism is really strong there. So anyway, but if you go to Rwanda, definitely like go visit memorials. Like I went to visit the Nyamata Church Memorial because in 94, Nyamata was a neighborhood of Tutsis. And what people don't realize is that Rwanda had smaller genocides for like the 50 years previously, off and on. And so normally when the neighborhood got dangerous, Tutsis would just go hide in the local church, the local parish. And it's mostly just like a really large one-room church. And people would hide there in the church because the church should be a safe place. And as far as I know, they generally were. But then when 94 happened, that was like the big one, the big genocide. And so that was the time when people weren't safe. Like if you go to Nyamata, you can still see the front gates. They're still bent because of the Interahamwe attackers, which was more or less the Hutus. The Interahamwe was a militia that busted the door down. You can see the bullet holes in the roof. And I never saw them, but apparently you can still see holes in the wall where they threw in grenades into a church that was like women and children in there. And so I don't know how much I should tell you because it's just so heartbreaking. But there's still blood spatters on the wall, and the remains of the people who died there, their relatives not their remains. Their remains are all buried, but their personal effects, like their clothing, like it's lined up on all of the church pews, and it's just so much. And then also they have a crypt that you can visit, and that's where it's mostly skulls, but you can go down into the crypt and you can look at a person's skull and you'll be like, oh my gosh, I know how you died, because you can see the machete mark on their skull. Yeah, sorry. I know this is heavy. But I bring this up because I think it's really important when we travel to not be afraid to descend into those dark places and to look into the dark places of human history, because I think you need to feel how terrible that is so that it never happens again. Like, I'm just going to be a little bit bold, and the attack on our Capitol last Wednesday, I bet you not one of those people has been to a place like Rwanda. I bet they've never actually felt that kind of trauma. Because if you have, you know how terrible it is, and you know how you never want violence to happen again to people. So anyway, I think I really learned a lot from my time in the Armada, because I guess I already said, I just don't want that to happen to anyone. I don't ever want the world to get so violent and so chaotic and so full of disagreement that we can't come together, because it's that level of violence is never worth it. Ever.
Yeah.
Ever. So anyway, Rwanda has memorials like that scattered throughout the country. So I think those are important for people to see. And I think it's also important to see how they've overcome that and the progress that they made and the things that they do better than we do. Like Kigali is a technology hub, and their water ditch drainage systems are probably better than ours. I think their roads in some ways are better than ours. And so, yeah, I absolutely think that you and I can all learn from that. So, sorry, I know that was really heavy. Do you guys have any questions, I guess, about that?
No, I don't think you should apologize for that. I think that's such a good point, is it's more fun to just like enjoy the food and the big, like, I don't know, big buildings or whatever you're supposed to go see.
The architecture.
Yeah. Like that's the fun part. But if we say that we want to experience culture, and if we say that we want to get to know other places, then we can't ignore, the sad parts of history. We have to embrace that as well. And I think that's a very good point of like knowing that that's a thing that happened and seeing the sadness of that. And the I think that's an important thing.
Yeah. And then another thing that we did was we went on a couple of like cultural day trips. So like one afternoon, I went to a basket weaving social entrepreneurship with a bunch of ladies.
Cool.
And they taught me how to weave baskets, and I bought like all of them. No, I couldn't afford all of them, but I definitely came away with more baskets than I intended. Because they taught me something I didn't know, and it was fun, and I got to know them a little, and I got to practice my French. And then another day, we went on like a market tour, and what else did we do? Oh, we got to visit a family's home and have a home cooked Rwandan meal. And this one ate with her hands, which I mean, I guess I eat sandwiches with my hands, but like this was like a dinner, a cooked dinner. And so, I got to experience that, which I just don't do that very often. And got to, just got to know new people. And so we did have those lighter moments of, experiencing like just normal everyday life. I visited schools, visited health clinics in Rwanda. Like, I loved every single bit of it.
That's awesome. Nice.
Yeah, it was a really meaningful time. And then we also did go on a gorilla trek too, which is
okay. So
totally
tell us.
Yeah.
Like, you can't just say that and then like not tell us what a gorilla trek is. And did you see gorillas?
We did.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's kind of expensive to go do it. Like when we went, a day pass into the park was like $800 US, and now it's
wow.
$1,500.
Wow,
And
that
you're
is expensive.
it is, but I think it's worth it because it's good for the economy and it's good for the gorillas. That helps care for the gorillas. And there's plenty of reputable companies that will take you out to go see them. And so, yeah, my cousin and I, we only hiked for about an hour. So you have a guide and you're with like a group of like maybe 10 to 15 other tourists, and you're all grouped together based on ability. So,
Oh, that's cool.
yeah. So if you're super athletic, then yeah, you might go higher into the mountains, to go see the gorillas because you can. Whereas we were in the middle group, so we only had to hike an hour. But yeah, you go with a guide, and they have machetes, and I think stun guns in case there's like a gorilla attack or something. But then you can also hire someone to carry your bag, which I did. Also contributing to the local economy. And yeah, we set out to visit one group, but we stumbled on a second group. And
Group of gorillas.
Yes, of gorillas. Yes. So so there's definitely they're set up kind of like families. So the silverback, so the big hairy gorilla with the gray back is like the dad gorilla. He's in charge. And then he's got his I don't know, sister wives, I guess. And then the babies are all in the family.
Aw.
And so you're only with them for an hour, and that's to protect them.
But that
They are
sounds so long. That's
Yeah.
really, I wouldn't think only an hour. It's like, oh my gosh, that feels like a lot of time.
It goes by so fast.
Really?
I mean, it's so magical. It's
Aw.
unbelievable because like your guide is like chop chop chop, like getting you. I mean, there is a path, but sometimes you have to go off path. So they chop chop chop, get you through the forest, and
Yeah.
and then they give you parameters like, hey, only get no closer than 20 feet, but you can't make a gorilla obey that rule. And yeah, I did get a little too close, and I didn't do it on purpose, but one of the lady gorillas got separated from the group, and so the silverback called her back, and like you can actually tell what they're saying. Like people have studied gorillas, and like I can't just decipher it like at all, but the guides know what they're saying. And so the gorilla said to the other gorilla, come back. And she came towards me, and I said to my guides, what do I do? And they said, stand still. So literally I was like standing still.
Like frozen in place.
Yeah, frozen in place. And I could feel her air as she like as she just brushed on by me. Like she didn't touch me, but I could like feel it still when she like got yeah. And so I could have been bulldozed by a gorilla. I'm really glad I was not. And but it was amazing. It was the babies are really cute, and they look just like Curious George, and gorillas are really human like really, really human like. And they looked really healthy. Like there's no comparison between wild gorillas and gorillas in the zoo. Like I think our local zoos do a good job of taking care of animals, but there's a difference. So anyway, yeah. And then we just were there for an hour, taking lots of pictures, just soaking it all in and observing them. And then you hike back, and that's that. And there's also other tours that you can do, like there's another species of monkey, the golden monkey. That's just like a normal size monkey that you can go observe, which I think is kind of fun. Um, and you go to the Virunga Mountains to go see the gorillas, and that actually is on the border of the Congo, which is a somewhat complex place to be still. So, there are, it's not that there's really safety concerns, but I think you do need to be mindful of that, because occasionally a tourist will pop on over to the Congo, and I'm not sure that's a good idea unless you do it through proper channels. I don't think anyone needs to be hopping borders just for the adventure of it.
Yeah.
Because if something happens, how are you going to get back?
Yeah.
So anyway, another one of those safety things that you need to kind of think through. So
that's so
yeah,
cool. Oh
yeah.
How does what you're paying help the gorillas? Are they like protecting their lands, or like what are they doing that's actually like contributing to that?
That's a good question. I honestly haven't delved that far into it, but I would assume that it's like for like upkeep, probably paying staff to keep the tourists in line.
Yeah.
Maybe for tracking the gorillas, like as in to care for them and to understand what's going on with them. Is their population growing? And it is growing, actually.
Cool.
Or if it's in decline, well, why is that? What's happening?
Okay. So maybe like a national park type of thing with like, why are there fees for national parks? It's because they're staff like maintaining the land. Okay.
I think that's very feasible. I can't say that with any authority, but that's what makes the most sense to me.
Awesome. Oh, that's so cool. Oh my goodness. Well, Andrea, thanks so much for sharing about this trip. It's so good to hear, and I don't know, really interesting. We have a couple questions for you. The first one is based on the title of our podcast, Take Me With You. If you could take us with you to just one thing on this trip, what would it be and why?
Oh, to Rwanda or anywhere?
To Rwanda.
To Rwanda.
To Rwanda. I think that I know where I'd take you. I would take you guys to a reconciliation village in Rwanda, where it doesn't happen very often, but it's not unheard of. And that's where Tutsis and Hutus live together in the same village on purpose. And they are modeling unity. And if you go on a tour to visit one, the one we did, we sat for an hour with my cousin, and I sat with a Hutu and a Tutsi who had survived the genocide. And they told their stories of what happened during that time. And we got to ask them anything we wanted. And what I learned is that a person can forgive the worst thing ever. And a person can repent of the worst thing ever. Because I met a man who committed murder. And what I learned is that if people can survive and repent and forgive the worst thing ever, then so can we all. And isn't that what this country needs right now? I think it is. So yeah, I would take you to a reconciliation village in Rwanda.
Wow. I didn't know those existed, and that is so beautiful.
They do.
And Andrea, we have our next question is not quite as fun in these COVID times. You may have an answer though. So it's what's your next trip? But if you don't have a next trip plan, which a lot of us don't, then what do you hope that your next trip will be?
Yeah, so I don't have any trips planned, but I hope that my next trip is to Israel, because I've always wanted to go for obvious reasons. I would love to see where Jesus came from. and where he lived. But I'll probably actually go to the Dominican Republic for a work trip.
Oh, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. And do you have any travel questions for us?
Okay. It'll be super easy. But
they may not be easy. Just be prepared that sometimes people think they're asking us easy questions, and Cheryl and I struggle. So just to put that out there.
And sometimes people ask us our favorite country, and then we ask them to ask us a different question because we've answered that one too many times.
Oh, okay. Okay. So to kind of piggyback on what I've been talking about, Ryan and Cheryl, what is the most meaningful trip you ever took and why?
Favorites are hard for me, or top things, but I think it's when I went to Morocco. I think just that is the most different culture from my own that I've been in. And we were teaching there. I was like with a group of teachers, and we were teaching like English classes at the summer school, but it was at this private academy in Casablanca. So it was for the rich kids, really. And like the families and the kids that we were reaching out to and serving were like the wealthy ones. And that was a really interesting experience, it being like a short-term mission trip, but like not to the poor people in that community, but to the rich people. And I kind of had to question that for myself. I mean, I didn't really do it out loud so much, but like I think I was processing, and it was interesting knowing like these kids are probably some of the future leaders of this country. And we met their parents, and they invited us in their homes that looked like palaces. And I mean, it was an amazing trip. Just even like as a tourist, we got to do some like incredible things in that country. And
oh my gosh,
I mean, like it was really special and amazing. Just like seeing, I don't know, all of that. But it was also interesting thinking about like, oh yeah, but like everybody needs to be reached, and like, you know, and not just like just the poor people either. And we can still have this impact on these kids even if they happen to be the wealthy ones in this country. And so that was I don't know, that was an interesting one. And also there were like people, American people there who are there long term. I don't want to give too many details about it or anything, but it was cool seeing that, you know. And I think kind of what you're sharing at the beginning is like getting to witness what other people are doing like full time all the time and everything. But yeah. Ryan, did you think of yours? Oh, sorry, you were gonna respond to that, Andrea.
Oh no, I just was like, that's amazing. I wish I could have gone on that trip with you.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, I think it's tricky to say like the most meaningful trip. I keep thinking of moments, you know, meaningful moments from lots of different trips. But if I think of just travel in general, I actually think that probably the one that was the most meaningful probably was the first time that I went to Ecuador, I think, when I was a freshman in high school, because that was my first international experience. The first time I'd been in a country where English was not the primary language. The first time that I got to see a missionary where they lived and what they were doing, as opposed to them, you know, coming and reporting back. The first time I experienced a church service in another language, which was so special and so cool. Especially singing.
Come to my church.
Do you guys do multiple languages?
Yeah. So I go to Rainier Avenue Church in Columbia City. Well, it's Hillman City, but you know, they're right next to each other. And yeah, we, on Sundays during services, when they do the Bible reading, they do it in a heart language and an English translation. And it's Creole, it's Spanish, it's French. I mean, it's everything. So anyway, but yeah, as you were saying, so you're in Ecuador, and the whole service is in Spanish.
Is in Spanish, which I didn't speak, right? Like as a freshman, I hadn't taken any world language classes yet. And the first time I interacted with other people, including like other people my age who, you know, lived in a different country, in a different hemisphere, you know, with a very different culture, and, you know, learned about indigenous people and what that, you know, what that means in, you know, besides just, you know, Native Americans, which, you know, I grew up learning about, but there's something different when you meet people, right? And finding out that there's indigenous people all over the world, right? And and they have some similarities in their stories and some differences in their stories, because, you know, they're their own cultures. And so I think as far as like, you know, it wasn't necessarily my favorite trip, or, you know, I had the coolest experiences, but as far as, you know, meaningful moments that really affected my perspective and the way that I have both traveled and lived my life since then, I think it was probably that trip, I think.
Wow. That sounds incredible.
Yeah. I'm really, really thankful to have been able to go on a trip like that and do those things and experience those things. And because, I mean, a lot of high school freshmen do not have the ability to do that, you know?
No.
So
No, they don't. They don't.
So I'm very, very thankful for
of course,
parents that supported, and other family that were supportive, and the school that I went to, and, you know, like so many things that, you know, made that possible. And then, you know, made it possible for me to continue to do other things and to love missions and, you know, all of those pieces.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds fantastic.
Well, I think it's time for us to move to the last segment of our podcast called Wish You Were Here. During this segment, each of the three of us is going to highlight a travel attraction from the different places that we've been. You can think of it kind of like a little snapshot or a postcard that you would grab for someone to send it home and say, oh my gosh, this thing was really cool. We wish you were here with me. So Cheryl, what would you like to do for your Wish You Were Here?
So I'm going to share about a place in Madrid that everyone should go to if you're in Madrid. Or maybe you should tack Madrid on to your trip so you can go here. This might be my favorite thing in Madrid. It's food related. So
of course it is, Cheryl. Of course it is.
And it is called Chocolateria San Ginés. And it's from 1894.
You're eating chocolate from 1894?
Yeah, and it's great. It's aged to perfection, you know. Yep. A little bit of mold. Don't worry too much about it. But this place, they have a super simple menu, which I love. It's like one of those places where like you're going to get the item that you should get from there. Maybe they have like coffee or something too. I don't even know. Pretty much they have churros that you dip in chocolate. And I mean, that's all you need. So
yeah.
And one order for two people is plenty, and you will be stuffed. And they have, it's so fun to watch you like go through this line. There's always going to be a line. And you go through, so you can like watch in the back as they're making them, and then you order just like how many you want pretty much. And then you get a ticket and you go to your seat, and then they bring out how many orders of it you ordered essentially. So pretty simple. But you can see this giant machine in the back that's like from above, the batter is going in, and it's like in a big spiral, and then they cut off pieces of the churro after it's fried. So, but it's like a giant coil of churro, and they just like cut off pieces and put it on your plate for you. And the chocolate is like what you might call like a sipping chocolate. Like it's like more like chocolate fondue, but you could sip it if you wanted. And so delicious. Just so good. And I've been there twice. The first time I went there, my sister Lisa and I had we took a train to Madrid, and we're gonna go straight to Toledo in a couple hours. So we were like, we have just a couple hours, and I was like, I heard about this place, Lisa. So we jumped on the metro and like went there for an hour, and then went back to the train station and went on a train somewhere else. But I was like, let's go do something in Madrid, and it was so worth it. It was so fun to go there. And then when I was there a couple of years ago again, I didn't get the chance to go there on the front end of my trip, but I ended my trip in Madrid and had a couple hours to kill, and I was like, oh, let's go to the chocolate and churros place. And it's so good, and it's such a fun experience. And so you need to go there and dip some churros in chocolate. So
I'm convinced. I'm going.
Yeah,
great.
I mean, you know, Cheryl, you know that food generally doesn't get me excited the way it gets you excited.
Mm-hmm.
But that does sound lovely, and I would
It's
make
so
that.
good.
I would definitely make time to go and get
Right?
a churro and chocolate.
Yeah. Yeah. It is worth it. Yeah. They have a gift shop too. So I think the second time I was there, I bought like chocolate
Did you buy
discs.
churros?
No, like chocolate discs that you can melt into your chocolate. And then I also got like a cocoa powder. So, you know, if you like their chocolate, you can go buy some at their gift shop too. So
I was gonna get the T-shirt, but
yeah.
that all sounds good too.
Just a coil of churros.
Nice.
It's interesting having a curved churro. And you're like, why is this curved? And it's because it's in a coil that they've
That's how
fried
they made it.
So
Yeah. Makes sense. Andrea, what would you like to do for your wish you were here?
I would take people to Seattle because this is where I live and I love this city. I love travel everywhere else, but I love my own city, and I would take people to Canton Alley in the International District to visit the Donnie Chin Memorial. And the Donnie Chin Memorial, I mean, and honestly, the Nehemiah Memorial kind of reminded me of it. But Donnie Chin died 5 years ago, and he was a neighborhood gatekeeper. So he grew up in the ID or maybe nearby. I don't know exactly where he grew up, but like anytime someone had an emergency, a lot of times the police were not quick to get there. They are still not. And so Donnie would sort of serve as a mediator. So he would go and he'd help people if they had like car issues or a burglary or a heart attack on the middle of the road, what have you. He would help senior citizens. And he got shot 5 years ago outside of a hookah lounge in the ID. And still his murder has not been solved. But he's greatly missed in the ID, and people still do. And they're just volunteers, but they still patrol the neighborhood because there's no one else to do it. And so if you go to Canton Alley, just outside the Wing Luke Museum, which another fantastic place to visit, but there's still a memorial outside the Wing Luke for Donnie and all the good he did. And his sister actually has a thrift store in the same alley that's open a couple hours a week. With COVID, I admit I'm not sure if her store is open. But I think we all need to go visit Donnie's memorial because like with Nehemiah, I think we all need to know what terrible things we as humans are capable of, but I also think we need to know what good we are capable of. And also along with that, I think when we travel, it needs to increase our awareness of justice and what that looks like. And so I think a visit to Canton Alley helps amplify that, if you will. And it's in a pretty cool location. I mean, the Wing Luke is right there, and that tells the story of our city. And I think Donnie's life tells the story of our city. And I think it's actually a story that a lot of Seattleites don't know. And I wish that they did. So, plus there's a lot of amazing food in the ID. And in real life, the Wing Luke does walking food tours.
Cheryl, did you know this?
No, I need to go. On all
Cheryl, get ready.
I love a food tour.
There's the barbecue tour. There's the rice tour.
Oh.
There's the what else is there? The noodle tour and the dumpling tour.
Oh, dumplings are the best things in the world.
You gotta go on the dumpling tour. And they used to have, okay, this is not food related, but they used to have a Bruce Lee tour, a walking tour. It was amazing. So anyway, yeah. So that's where I would take folks. I know it's fun. You learn stuff. You eat good food.
Yep.
Yep.
Nice. Ryan, how
Yeah.
about
So
you?
Ryan, where would you go?
Well,
Or what's your place?
I'm also going to stay in Washington State, but I'm going to go to the opposite side of the state over in Spokane, Manitou Park. I can't say that I've spent a lot of time in Spokane, but I have spent some time there, and Manitou Park is gorgeous. I was there in the summer when I was there, and they had rose gardens and flower beds and just tons of places you can just walk and enjoy the beauty just of being outside, and beautifully manicured areas. And it's pretty big, and there's lots of green grassy areas. And it's just a really cool place to just go and chill and hang out. And I think, I'm trying to remember, it's not like super far outside of actual Spokane, but it feels like kind of like this sanctuary, when you've got, a city, and Spokane isn't a huge city, but it's not a small city by any stretch of the imagination either. Right. And so to have this kind of place to retreat to and just kind of relax and let things kind of feel like they can slow down and just kind of enjoy nature. If you're in the Spokane area, I would recommend Manitou Park.
Noted. Yeah, I go to Spokane every so often, and I've never been.
I've been there in the winter and the fall, and it's gorgeous in both of those seasons, but I would love to see in the other ones too, because I feel like it's one that like looks so different in every season.
Yeah, I've seen pictures of it in the winter with the snow, and it just looks gorgeous with the snow, but it's a completely opposite experience to what I had when I went in the summer. So,
wow.
Yeah.
I'll need to visit there too.
Right?
That sounds amazing.
That's the problem with Cheryl and I doing this podcast, is our list of places to go just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And especially with COVID, we can't go to a lot of them right now. So
I know.
Yeah, it's a problem.
It's the worst. Cheryl,
Yes.
I know you don't live too far from me. We should do our own dumpling tour and do takeout.
Okay. So in.
Ryan,
So
do you live near Seattle?
I'm in a suburb of Seattle. Yeah.
Dude, man, dumpling walking food tour. I'm just saying.
It would be fun in a group because then we won't get too full too quick. We got to pace ourselves on it. So that sounds good. Then we can try more things. Oh, that'd be really fun.
Of course, you got to eat the dumplings while you're walking, but
that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah, that's doable. That's doable.
Well, Andrea, thank you so much for being on our podcast. It was a pleasure having you today. I would love if you could plug your art and then also sponsoring a child through your organization.
Oh, yeah. So my art website is an Etsy website. So you can just go to andreakrooksart.etsy.com. And my last name is spelled with a K. So it's andreakrooksart.etsy.com. But Krook is Krook. So I hope I made that easy and not confusing to understand. But it's andreakrooksart.etsy.com.
We'll link it in the show notes below so people can just click on the link in the show notes.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. And then to sponsor a child, you can go to cotni.org, childrenofthenationsinternational.org, but it's cotni.org. And there are plenty of children who just need a sponsor. It's $36 a month and covers a kid's health care, their education, their mosquito nets, clean water, all of the basics. And you can sponsor for as long as you like. Some people only sponsor for a year, and that's just fine. So yeah, cotni.org for child sponsorship at $36 a month, and it will change a kid's life, and it will also change your life.
Awesome.
That's great.
I think so.
That's great.
Yes.
Absolutely. Well, we would love it if our listeners would follow us on social media. We are at TMWI Podcast. That's TMWI for Take Me With You Podcast. We are on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter.
You can also email us at timwepodcast@gmail.com. Send us suggestions of guests we should have on the podcast, topics we should cover, and tell us about your most meaningful trip.
You can also call us and leave us a voicemail at 406-763-8699, or if it's easier for you to remember, 406-POD-TIMWE. We would really appreciate it if you would rate and review our podcast to tell other people what you think about it. Subscribe to make sure you do not miss any of our new episodes, and share about this episode on your social media so more people can hear about all of the great experiences that Andrea has shared with us today and about Rwanda and sponsoring children and all of the really, really cool things that she's been involved in.
As always, thank you to Beth Reed Miller for the awesome artwork. You can check out more of Beth's artwork at Beth Is Something. And thank you to Erica Corbin for the use of her song Round the Globe. You can listen to Erica's music wherever music is sold or streamed.
Andrea, we've really enjoyed having you on the podcast and telling us more about Rwanda and your art and the confluence of all of those things. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It was lovely to be here.
Yay!
Absolutely. Well, that's all we have for this week. So until next time, remember to take me with you.
Take me with you.
Can we get a sailboat chasing down the sunset as we float round and round the globe? Salty air and balmy nights, guided only by the lights above, and a little love. All the world is out there waiting.